a fallout from last week's storms that saw many areas without power, saw a lot of flooding, is that some areas that do see flooding normally were bombarded. And in particular, we're talking about Bay Village. Now, we've done stories on the flooding that they've seen for years. In fact, if you go to the article that we have linked to this story, we have one from 2017. So this has been a fundamental problem for a long time. Such a fundamental problem, in fact, that now people are just getting flat out upset over this and don't understand why it can't be fixed. So a meeting has been called today to discuss the sewage system and the water displacement that's done in the area. What will we learn from this? It's not really clear. However, they do have multiple different agencies that are present in this, including people that are just upset about it, to try and provide at least a little bit of an answer into what is being done. All right, so let's bring you live now to Bay Village and this meeting to discuss what is to change, potentially, with how the water is handled in Bay Village and how they will attempt to remove it.
Meeting that we had, some plans were mentioned then, and that is what tonight is about. It's an update and hopefully an answer to many of your questions. So with respect to everyone's time, we will begin tonight with information from Mr. Pilarski, and we have had some residents who have said, I don't want to hear this, I want to hear that, and other residents who have said, but I want to hear that, I don't want to hear this. Therefore, you will get a little bit of where we've been, where we are, what is done, and where we're headed. And hopefully it will not be in language that is too technical for us to follow along with. Following his presentation, I will open it up to the others I introduced if they would like to add anything, questions from this committee and council, and then it will be opened up to the residents. The residents will be asked to state your name and address for the record, and our clerk of council, Ms. Kemper. I'll give anyone who has a question the floor. I will ask the first person that gets up to pick up the microphone and then pass it to anyone else. And the reason for that is we have a lot of residents on Zoom, and they always say they can't hear what is being said in the audience or the questions being asked, and this will help assure that they can hear us all. I know that many of you are anxious to hear from the mayor also on this important issue, and I would ask that he conclude tonight's meeting with his comments and answer any questions that were not previously answered. I know the importance of this and the emotion, and we want everyone to be respectful. I want everyone to leave here feeling that their questions were answered. And with that, I'll turn the floor over to Mr. Pilarski. Do you need my phone? Oh, sorry. Sorry.
Thank you, Councilwoman DeGeorge. My name is Jeff Pilarski with Chagrin Valley Engineering, municipal engineer for Bay Village along with Don Ruth. Tonight, what our goal is to explain sewer system in the city, how they're connected to your homes, what affects the flows and basement backups, and provide you with a general plan and our path forward, what we're planning to do. Seeing as these storms just happened multiple times over the last month and a half to 2 months, we don't have specific answers. So I just want to make that clear. We have items that we're going to address. We know where there could be some smoking guns per se, but we don't have specific answers for you tonight, but we're going to be working on that. And hopefully after I speak to you, we'll have some Q&A back and forth and be able to answer some of the individual questions if you like. So I can just start out and talking about the system overall, our sewer system. It's made up of sanitary sewers and storage sewers. And those are broken into different items. We have 350,000 feet plus of sewer mains, sanitary sewer mains. So that's sanitary sewage, as you know, is all your plumbing fixtures. And we have about 15,000 feet of sanitary force mains. Those are connected to 4 lift stations. So areas where the sewers can't flow by gravity to the final point, it goes to the lift station. goes through those force mains. We have about 358,000 feet of storm sewers. That takes the water from the streets, from the gutters, and downspouts in a perfect rule, and conveys it eventually to Lake Erie. And culvert wise, we have about 3,200 feet of culverts. Culverts are storm sewer conveyance, like under the road from one side to the other. It's not a continued network of sewers. In the sanitary system, 1,400 plus manholes, and the storm system, 973. So that's the system that the folks in the service department maintain annually. We do maybe 40 to 50,000 feet plus sewer inspection and cleaning. They have cameras to put in the sewers. They have a rat camera, which stick down a sewer, which you kind of give them a general idea of the condition, the blockages, and the newer technology. So they use all that with their crews to go out, along with some trucks for flushing and backing out to maintain that system. This map shows the reported water and basement calls that was received from the city in July and August through those 4 storms. Now we show it in colors: sanitary, orange, blue is reported stormwater, and purple is a combination. We don't have verified as far as where it came from. It's just residents calling in and saying, here's what we think. But those squares you see are properties that were called in for those storms up through the storm. This is a map showing service calls from 2019 to present, and it shows where the sewer crews have gone out to assist residents or to address issues on the streets. This is a color-coded map, pink being critical in their categorization, and black being all the way down to black being routine. So you can see it's all, the entire city has had the same calls in one way or another for this is either sanitary or storm. It's not one or the other. I mean, since 2019, right? Getting into how sewer system works and is connected to your homes, we have, it shows a home there, as you can see on the left side, and to the right is the street. The blue pipe in the street is a storm sewer. It's higher than the sanitary sewer. And the green pipe is the sanitary sewer. So, pointer to work here we go. So you see this, starting with the storm sewer, there's a pipe called a sewer lateral, goes back to your home. That picks up downspouts, and it picks up footer drains. So the footer drain can either be tied directly into that storm lateral, or it can be connected into a sump pump. Those of you that have sump pumps in their basement, that goes out of your home, and then typically will tie into this to the storm sewer lateral. Moving over to the sanitary system, the green pipe, that, as I said, takes all your plumbing fixtures. So, and home that's connected properly, you have your bathroom fixtures, sinks, all that, your showers, you have washing machine going into there, you have floor drains in your basement. So that is a typical connection diagram of the way your home should be connected into city's sewer mains. I want to talk a little bit about something called infiltration and inflow. That is, infiltration and inflow is stormwater that gets into sanitary system. sanitary systems are not constructed or sized to take a large amount of stormwater. And what happens over the years is the sanitary system becomes less tight. In other words, a lot of the joints open up it, or the sewer pipe deteriorates and allows water to get in to that sanitary system. So in this diagram, there is two sources. There's two sources shown of the way the stormwater gets in. One is infiltration. Infiltration is stormwater that gets in through joints or cracks in the sewer pipes themselves. So kind of think of it as kind of leaking in here and there all throughout the system. And there's something called inflow. And inflow is more of a direct connection. So if you have the brown items here, like a roof drain connection going right into the sanitary clean out, or a yard drain going directly into the sanitary, those are what's called inflow sources. So it's a whatever's going into that downspout or yard drain is going right into the sanitary, and that can quickly overwhelm the system. You also see a nice tree here with roots. That is an issue where it gets into both the sanitary lateral and the storm lateral and causes problems. Sanitary lateral will block it, plus groundwater and stormwater in. Gets into your storm lateral, it can block the flow in that storm lateral before it reaches the storm sewer, and then ends up backing up. Storm water ends up backing up for drains, basements. So the tree roots have a kind of a double whammy effect with that little storm at the sanitary. On the right here, that's just an example from a sewer video of a sewer main that's tested. What we did was dye in storm sewer, dyed water, and flood that storm sewer, and then put a can into the sanitary sewer, which is what you see there. The look of the water is in the sanitary sewer. So that's what happens. That's an infiltration source on the sewer main. You can see there's a lot of water coming in. And that can cause problems when you have multiple locations like that. This when water backs up into the basement, sometimes it occurs because the sewer is what's called surcharge. And it's an engineering term, but basically it means water has filled up the main over the top of the sewer pipe. So it actually ends up kind of pushing flow through under pressure. So when the sewer capacity is exceeded, the water goes up, kind of forces its way through. And when it reaches a certain point of the basement, let's say, the surcharge level in the manhole basically reaches the same elevation base. So if you have a basement that's lower and it's not much higher than the storm sewer, that surcharge level doesn't have to come up very high to get into the basement. So this is what happens when you direct backup from the main into the house. The sewers are over capacity because of the amount of rainfall. Just a quick rainfall history in the last 2 months. The Cleveland area has got 6.6 inches more rain compared to the typical year for July and August. And they're both, over 6 inches of rain. This is from the Hopkins gauge. There's over 6 inches of rain in both months with those 4 events. And the issue with multiple rainfalls back to back is one of the issues is it changes the runoff that's coming off the rain. If the ground is fairly dry, the initial rainfall just soaks in a quick flash going off to the catch basins and into sewers. When we have a situation like this, we have multiple heavy rains close together, the ground doesn't get a chance to dry out, so soil is basically soaked with water. And what's going to happen when there's a heavy rain, can't go into the ground, so it immediately flashes on into the street, into the catch basins. And there's typically more water because of that, because of multiple places back to back. So that's what we have experienced. So it's not only the amount of rain that's much over the normal average, it's also the fact that the ground is completely soaked and the water cannot soak in. So they do that kind of initial storage that's driven off. It's almost like everything is paved with asphalt, concrete, everything's. And just quick, since the rainfall wise, physical wise, we had some 50-year frequency rainfalls back in July. That occurred, and then last there was a couple of 25-year frequency. Another one says, why did we get 325-year frequencies in 1 year? It's more of a statistics thing. So sometimes we read the paper, we had a 100-year storm. And when we had one last year, what that really means it was a 1% storm, 1 over 100 years, 1% chance that that storm is going to happen in 1 year. Unfortunately, it happens more often than.
Jeff, can you piggyback on that, on how systems are built to match certain year events?
Sure. So the design of storm sewer systems, and you just look at the storm sewers, those are designed based on rainfall amounts, certain storm frequency. So there's, for example, residential streets are designed, storm sewers are designed for 5-year rainfall. Commercial areas are 10-year, and a heavy commercial middle of town are 25 years. So basically, all the sewers that everyone here is hooked up into, storm sewers were designed for a 5-year rainfall on that. But then you also have more intense storms now than what was what the sewers were designed for back then. 5-year back in the 30s, probably less rain, less intense than a 5-year storm present today. So that's what's in the ground right now. Sanitary sewers are designed for a flow per home from the plumbing fixtures, basically 100 gallons per day for the person, plus a small factor for the infiltration and inflow. So sanitary sewers are smaller than storm sewers. They're only supposed to carry sanitary plus a little bit of 99 infiltration and inflow. And so sanitary sewers on the streets start out at 8 inches in the minimum, and then they go on up. We have some that are interceptors 5 foot height at the end, as towards Rocky River plant. But on most of the streets, they're probably 8, 10, or 12-inch sewers, and those can easily get overwhelmed by the ionite falls. It only takes. I saw something the other day as far as not roof drains, but sump pumps. So a sump pump connected to the sanitary sewer, which happens quite prevalent. It can kick out as much sanitary flow as 26 homes. Equivalent. So you get 26 homes just from this one home going into the sanitary sewer. So you get some of a electrical around on the street. On one street, that sanitary sewer goes up pretty quick. And it also happens with the gutters go in there, and the gutters don't have to be necessarily tied right into the sanitary. They can go into a downspout line around the house from older homes, like that goes through footers. But there's open joints, sanitary, there's open joints in the storm around your house. The water just goes out of the storm, down into the sanitary, and goes again, basically like a direct connection. So there's a lot of sources where the I it's not just pipe, storm pipe into stands. So, as I said, we've gotten some initial data on where the flooding has occurred. And we're getting a lot more in now. We've got survey that just went out. I think we're up to 200 now, over 200 responses. And we'll be getting information from that and try to pinpoint the major areas of concern where those homes are getting flooded. And also to determine is it storm or is it sanitary based on what you folks are reporting back as for what you're seeing coming in to your homes, coming into the wells, floor drains, clear sewage. So we're gonna get a lot of information from that. So we're going to start coming up with reviewing each of those areas and what we're gonna be looking at in each area specifically. Is it storm, the sanitary, the cold? They're both related, but we're looking at them in different ways when you're looking at flooding causes. As I said, we're going to be reviewing the impact areas and from the surveys. Then what we're going to do is we're going to go out and the sanitary system and do this all smoke testing. Pumps just like into the sanitary sewer that flows through the system back to the house laterals. We see there's smoke coming out of downspouts, out of ground, out of driveway drains. To try to get a kind of target where it may be coming from on that street. Then we follow that up with dye testing of the mains. That's where I mentioned before, where I showed you that video or that picture. Put the dyed water in the storm sewer up above sanitary, see what's leaking in the sanitary. Those are, and when we do those tests and we see where it's coming in on the mains, that's pretty simple to see, and we can fix that without a lot of more study. We can just go in and line the sewers to seal them up so that doesn't happen. But when we get into the area off the right of way on private property, I track that source, those sources down, it's a little tougher. And we will be dye testing properties where we see the smoke coming out, try to pinpoint where the sources of I&I are. And if your property is going to be dye tested, we will you'll receive a letter stating that. And what that does is a crew comes out and tries to simulate a rainfall. They have multiple hoses, 4 hoses hook up to the downspouts at one time, turn the water on so there's water coming through each downspout. And we'll have a camera in the sewer lateral to see the effect of that. So if we start seeing the dyed water from the downspouts coming in, we can be sure that that's a source of infiltration and infill. So that's something that we're going to do after we review the results of the surveys and the smoke testing. Another thing we do to try to track down the I&I is the manhole inspections. Now, the service department does that during their regular course of work. But we'll look at if we find any manholes that have leaks in them. Those are candidates to seal up and get it sealed up. Regarding the drainage, so I know survey results so far, there's been a lot of stormwater patterns, like clear water, and gonna pick up the frequency of looking at where the storm sewers outlet. And making sure those outlet points are open. So what happens in storm sewers, like I said, it goes to the lake eventually, but before it gets to the lake, it may go to a ditch, go to a creek. We want to make sure that point, the end of pipe point is open. So It's not backing up the dam. So we're gonna keep doing that. And, there are some, I think we have 14, well, we have 12 direct pipe outlets to the lake. Some of them are in areas that are tough to get to, but over the years we do check those. We're gonna make sure that those are all open too. But we don't want the storm sewers backing up in the pipe. It ends up backing up into the streets too, affecting street drainage and affects the I&I loans. So when we get some results from our testing, we're gonna do some rehabilitation. And that rehabilitation includes work on the public side. On the public side, we're gonna make sure that we have persistent root problems in mains. We get those taken care of and line those both in the sanitary and in the storm side. Also, where we see the leaking joints in the sanitary, where we do the dye testing, we get those sewers sealed up. And at times we'll do laterals from the main back either 10 feet or to the right-of-way line. Right-of-way lines that look up the sidewalk and the sidewalk. We'll line those laterals because we find that there's a lot of water coming in there at times. And just an interesting point, it's like there's about 2 times more linear feet of sewer on the lateral side, so from the main back to the house, as there is on the mains. So if you think of joints that are leaking in sewers, we have 2 times as many joints just on those laterals. So that's why we have to look at the sewer laterals. They are efficient, get those sealed up. On the on both the storm and the sanitary sewers, we are going to look at hospital choke points in areas where the sewer from one direction comes in, needs a sewer from another direction. Look at the geometry of it. If the flows are opposing, causing some issues, look at realigning those things, those areas. Other choke points that we see, there's sewers that are look like they're undersized by a large amount. Look at what can be done to augment those, to try to push more flow through the system. You understand that when we look at enlarging any sewer, you can't just look at, say, your street. You need bigger sewers on the street. Off the sewer at the end of the street takes your flow away to the next sewer is not big enough. Or look at that, large that. So it just bumps on down the line to the point where you may have to replace many sewers just to get to the sewer number 1 street point. So we have to look at that, see what the impacts are downstream. You can't just enlarge things. You might be losing profits in the period. The last 2 points are basically just monitoring the sewer, what can be done, try to make sure that what we've done in the area has reduced flows in the sanitary, had a positive effect. So we install full monitors before the work and after the work, kind of gauge how things are working out for us. Moving over on the private side, which is the private property side, we're protecting properties that we see could be issues based on our snow testing. And there may be properties on the private property side to be addressed. Those can be a myriad of things. Try to identify those and let the residents know where the problems are. Because if you don't address the private side, we're not gonna help the overall system. So it takes both private property and public property improvements to solve the problem many times. There's a timeline that we have at this point. So the next couple of months, we're going to be getting proposals from contractors for the testing, set up the testing program, and get them started out in the areas that have the densest flooding issues. The other thing is we're going to publish a sewer information guide on many use Westlake. Pretty good guide to how systems work and what can be done. We're trying to minimize water in the basements. We're anticipating from about November, July, doing the actual testing. And we're also going to look at some of the low-hanging fruit to get the projects out that it removes the I&I or help the storm sewer system and storm sewer side initially without a lot of study, a lot of try to get those projects moving forward. Here's the next year to December of 27. It's a long time, but we have to digest the information, come up with the programs, get them out to bid. December 27 was a date we have there now. May be able to accelerate that. But I think by the end of that period, we'll be dealing with more of the areas that have less dense flooding preference. We want to hit the ones that have the most flooding initially, and then most of them take care of all of it. And then after 27, we will be continuing investigations and rehab programs on an annual basis to continue to try to improve the system. Systems are old, as you know, and they're maybe about 100 years old. So it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of projects to keep on with it. And all through this time, the service department will continue doing very good work as far as continuing flushing, analyzing, making sure the lines are open just throughout the city. So we're doing all this, because we want to obviously improve the basements as much as we can. And improving sanitary and storm sewer systems. So that work is also augmented by some requirements we have for our river association with the wastewater treatment plant. One of 4 cities that all that sewage goes to Rocky River. Each one of the communities is on a requirement to reduce I&I from each city. That's an EPA requirement, and the EPA requirement is passed down to all of us. So that by doing this work, we will help attain that goal, the Rocky River plant. We have to meet our general EPA permit requirements with regards to the stormwater system and our ventilation, so we continue to do that. We have what's called an administrative order on consent from the US EPA, and we've been working on that for several years now, planning, and now we're in the design process. We have to put in a storage tank and a sanitary system to hold back flows during wet weather, during rainfall events. And the reason we have to do that is because there's 2 sanitary sewer overflows that still remain in the city. US EPA said, no, can't handle those. So we have to take those out. In order to take those out, we have to build a 1.3 million gallon bath up in the ground, basically, big tank. So that's one of the things that that we're working on right now. The last planning item is getting an understanding, especially in these impacted areas, of the capacities of the storm sewer and the connection and configuration from homes to try to obviously reduce the basement backups. Some homes have connections from the storm sewer into their basements to floor drains. It just isn't like so try to help residents understand what's going on with their homes. So those items can be addressed. We can't see this too much, it's just small spreadsheet numbers, but it shows through 2033, we had planned on about $21 million worth of work. On this is the sanitary system alone. A chunk of that, 14 million is on that sewer overflow elimination project that I just talked about, the big tank and sewers in the Lake Road area and Russell area, and others areas. But this is before all the rain events happened in the last 2 months. We had I&I reduction in there, program for that program for studies, plus replacements of other infrastructure that we need to replace. We have some force mains that are 70-ish years old that we need to replace just to keep the system on. Those force mains aren't there. Start back in the sanitary sewers. We also have a lift station improvements that we need to do also. That's on the sanitary side, and that's where, the recent increase in the sewer use fee helps to pay for all this, the sanitary system. So that concludes what I wanted to convey at this point. We wanted to convey.
Thank you. Does anyone else from the city side have anything they'd like to add before we turn it over? You don't know?
I do not.
Okay, I'm gonna mix up the agenda a little bit. I originally had that, the committee and council would ask questions, but because there are so many of you here, we'll start with the resident questions instead, and hopefully some of our questions will get answered by your questions. Who wants to go first? No. Nothing gets thank you.
Ian Straight of Manchester Lane. This question was submitted in advance, so I'm hoping for a robust response. So the gentleman from Chagrin provided data from 2019 forward, and his opening comments seemed to suggest the rain frequency was new. In late June or July of 2015, the city experienced significant flooding. I live in Manchester, nearly every home in this area had water damage. So much so, the city had to send front-end loaders and dump trucks to assist in removing damaged household goods. I want to hear what specific infrastructure projects the city has undertaken since the summer of 2015 to debottleneck and improve the sewers and drainage in the city. I expect to hear specific shovel in the ground kinds of projects. I don't want to hear about video cameras and data gathering. I have specific interest in stormwater remediation project. I would suggest that you could have presented a map with all those colored blocks of city homes from 2015 that showed the impact, and there was substantial data available from that year to have informed tangible projects.
Who wants to answer that?
So since 2015,
We can't hear the gentleman speak, sir.
This is John Liskovic, our service director, for those who may not know John.
Everyone can hear me? 2015, project wise, we have completed a handful of stormwater projects, substantial projects that, such as the replacement of the Columbia Road culvert, that was completed in 2019. See, stormwater, sticking with stormwater, we also worked with the city of Avon Lake in 2020 to provide an expansion to the Walker Road retention basin. Also, we did complete in 2017 replacement of storm sewer on Osborne Road. We've also done some work within our waterways, also in that time period, shoring up areas around infrastructure such as storm and sanitary mains that have to be exposed, and providing support and protecting them from the stormwaters that are in the so that kind of covers the stormwater component that the resident requested. We've also done a number of sanitary projects too. If you'd like, yes, additional information of that. We've had focus on a lot of improvements on our lift stations, which we are very critical and important to conveyance of the sanitary flow from various areas of the city to our treatment plant and such like that. And additionally, we've got ongoing and very extensive maintenance that we do just on a daily basis to do our sanitary and
Microphones? Who has
I'm in that over there.
your name?
Kimberly Moore, I live at 360 Pinewood. I check all the boxes for all of the things that a homeowner can do. My house is 98 years old. And I've had my lines divided, I don't have storm infiltrating sewer, anything like that. My question is, what has the city been doing to maintain these lines? Very specifically, we all know we have inadequate sewer capacity, and this is a process, it's expensive, digging up, we know it likes the orange barrels. But maintaining these lines, I would like to see a detailed plan of what we have been doing and how that's going to change. Because that's something we can do and do better. My big concern about the flooding is that it's largely because we aren't doing anything as dramatically as we need to. So having a printout available to us through the, click on it and print it, what was the plan, what was the maintenance plan, where were the streets, how was it being addressed, how frequently, and exactly what are they doing, and then, okay, that's not enough, so what are we doing going forward, how are we going to improve that in a way that will make a dramatic difference?
John, can you speak to the maintenance program that? Please speak to the maintenance
Sure.
program.
Sure, and if I miss something, my supervisor can fill in. So we've got within the service department, we've got dedicated about 4 members of our staff that do maintenance within the system, and an additional 2 members that also maintain our lift stations. Our maintenance consists of CCTV filming with our camera truck for defects and issues within the system. We also do flushing of all the mains throughout the system, and then we also have acoustic technology that we've been brought on within the past 2 years to help improve and make our ability to get through the system even more efficient. Each year, we over the past 5 years, we have been improving and increasing our efficiencies. Last year, as an example, which was noted on the slide, we covered over 50,000 plus feet of mains within our system. To date, right now, we've covered over 80,000 feet. And that puts us on roughly a 6-year turn to get through the city. And that's where we're at as far as the maintenance component right now.
So are you saying that every 6 years, the lines near my home are gonna get cleared? Roughly, that's the cycle?
That's, as we sit today, like I said, we've been working to improve efficiencies over the past 5 years. So if we continue at this rate, yes, it would be a 6-year cycle.
How are you gonna improve? We wanna improve that.
It shouldn't be happening.
No.
You should have something done every 2 years.
Questions only, please, microphone, please. Who has the microphone?
I have, like,
You have the
I just
microphone?
wanted,
Give it to him.
just wanted to supplement what John said. When I came into office, and when I was on council at the end, I was been critical of lack of a long-term plan. And so at the end of 17, I had spent a lot of time with a past engineer, made a decision in 18 to look for a new engineering firm and bring on Chagrin Valley, basically in the beginning of 19. Kim, to your point on investment, earlier this year, knowing that we want to turn that quicker, we placed into service about 6 months ago a second service vehicle for sucking and flushing. To do that, historically, we've had one. We invested a few years ago in a new camera truck with state-of-the-art technology. But having that second vehicle so we can staff it and move through it more quickly is super important. John had referenced the SL rack, which for sanitary lines, it works well, not so much for storm. But puts sound waves through. You get a certain sound wave back, we know that line is cleared, we can move more quickly through the system. So we're not trying to just put more resources on it, we're trying to use technology that is going to allow us to move through the system more quickly. To my knowledge, I'm not sure if any other cities are using that. That's all newer technology, and that second truck that came online this year is intended to increase that turn. And so we've just gotten online, and that's where we're at now.
Thank you. Renee has the microphone.
Can I add to this?
Yes, absolutely. This is our public works supervisor.
So, my name is Paul Greenwell. I'm the public works supervisor, and I feel like I'm the boots on the ground guy that can speak to this maintenance. When it's not raining cats and dogs, nobody's calling us. The system functions. So to say that there needs to be maintenance on a line, it's not always the case. We're out there cleaning, we're mandated by the EPA to do a certain amount, we're meeting those expectations. So to say that every single sewer needs to be flushed is really not the right answer, Our guys are excellent, they know this system better than anybody, they know where we have, some, I'm not gonna call them trouble spots, but maintenance issues, that if we don't do certain things in a certain amount of time, then we have trouble. And those have all been identified, they get reviewed, we're in those areas all the time. So we have a 2-month list, a 4-month list, a 6-month list. And it might only affect, a group of people in a cul-de-sac. But if we are not there in 2 months, then they're calling us. I can sympathize with everybody in this room. People have been experiencing this ever since they lived here. This is nothing new. Our volume, that I&I that we're talking about, that goes through the roof in a rain event is the cause of this. It's not a maintenance issue. We have eked out all the flow that we can get out of the system by the maintenance we're doing right now. One of the big projects was cleaning that interceptor, which is the main line that pretty much everybody's waste ends up going to the Rocky River treatment plant in. That had never been cleaned before. 2011 was the first time we had it cleaned completely. We removed tons and tons and tons of material. It was actually reducing our amount of flow that we can get there. And every year since, we've gone back and repeatedly started from the one end and worked our way to the other one. So we've maximized our flow. This isn't a flow issue. This is a leaky pipe issue and an I&I. In a normal rain event, we send 2 million gallons to Rocky River, 2 million MGD, is how they estimate it. When we get it like Hurricane Sandy came through, we jump up to 14 million. So we go from 2, everybody's fine,
to all of a sudden, we can't handle it. And so that's why you see the surgings in the sewer and the flow go back down. So if a sewer is blocked, it doesn't matter if it's raining out or not, you're gonna be calling us because it's gonna start affecting everybody on the street. It's not gonna stay there. So, you know, we're out there, we're doing everything we can to maintain the sewers. I'm really confident that we're doing it, you know, that those aren't the issues that are causing these issues. Maintenance is not the issue.
Thank you. Matt and Sarah, you want to step up microphone? Renee has it. Thank you.
This is Sarah Sweeney. I'm at 368 Oakmore. I just first have a kind of a comment, then I have a question. I guess the comment is I also think that there is a big public relations issue here. I mean, I think that, yeah, you know, we are a wealthier suburb, but this has caused like a major economic hit to many of our households. Like we have maxed out our insurance, plus we're gonna pay over it, and we don't even have a sense of like how much we're gonna have to put into our homes, like a sump pump and change our drains and all of this. And I think it has been disappointing that it seems that it's coming from council, aside from Councilwoman DeGeorge, who I think has been really reaching out to us, that we haven't had folks on the ground with us in our basements, like week after week, where we're tearing out like damaged stuff with sewage. I mean, I was in my basement again last week, like pulling out a new floor that I put in last year. So I think there needs to be some change in like the tone of how you approach this, and like come out and see what we're dealing with. Like people have torn up their basements now 4 or 5 times, and stuff is more expensive. Our, you know, education is more expensive. Everything is more expensive for us. So we're taking huge economic hits, and we don't have as big of like nest eggs as you would think. So we really would like you to like kind of speak to that when you're approaching this. And I guess the question I have is, I appreciate all the comments on like dealing with the sewers, but what are we doing to look at the impact of the changing climate on our community? Do we have any research that we've done on what we can expect as like a lakeside community for changes in rain flow or drought or any of that? And then like, what are our best practices then in dealing with runoff? Because we obviously don't have a policy on that because we're letting, I mean, I love Heinen's, but they built a humongous black asphalt parking lot where everything goes into the sewers. And that's definitely not like best practices for runoff for communities that might be experiencing higher rain flow. So do we have any like evaluation of what we can expect with rain flow? Do we have any plans on managing runoff like swales and policies for new homes and new parking lots?
Thanks for your comments. I do sympathize with folks that had basements, but I didn't hear I had my basement flooded. So, yeah, it's not fun. It is a real burden, both mentally and financially. But as far as, you know, what's in place to manage development, if there's a subdivision built or a commercial area that's developed, they have to conform to our stormwater management code, which basically requires some type of stormwater control measure, like a pond or underground storage, keep the flows to a pre-developed level or less. So those things are required now, as of many communities, based on the community like that.
That I think it's the federal level.
Yeah, the kind of, what are we doing to predict what's going on? It's, we're not climatologists, because I know they're looking, there was an article I read a few months ago, they're looking at the NOAA, which publishes the rainfall frequency tables, National Oceanographic Atmospheric Association. They're looking at redoing their rainfall intensity tables, which is what we use to design systems. So that's getting it on there, and we can do that at our level. Just predicting weather is not something that's easily. But we are aware that more intense rainfall does happen.
Next question. Start here at the front.
Dave Cole again, I live on Kenilworth.
all sewers from houses to the street have been inspected by the city when they were constructed or built. What are you gonna tell people who need to make changes when their sewers have been connected the way the city said they had to be connected?
That's something that, the discussion point that we have to have. This city is just like every other city in respect. There's a lot of stuff that was done on the slide.
What about it's necessarily on the slides?
Well,
When the
It was
house was
done.
built, the sewers were open.
Right.
The inspectors had every opportunity
right,
to inspect it and approve it.
and they possibly didn't do their job.
But
But you also have,
people have a certificate of occupancy.
back then, who knows? I don't know what they did in the 30s and 40s as far as that type of certification and inspection. The issue is, we gotta deal with it. And we're left with that bad legacy.
Over here?
Hi, Lauren Cisco, I live on Aberdeen Road. So I kind of want to counter something that someone said that this is an old property. So my husband and I moved in 6 years ago. I've never had issues with our house. Our house, we know the previous tenants, our neighbors know the previous tenants. They did not flood except once in 2009. They didn't flood in Sandy, they didn't flood in 15 to anyone else. Our house has been waterproofed, we have sump pumps, we've had extra work done. Our lines have been snaked every year since we moved in. We've done what we can do. I listened to the July meeting. My father-in-law came and represented us because we were out of town. And everyone asked the same question of what has changed. And all anyone keeps pointing to is the number of rainfall, which I understand these have been higher rainfalls. But that can't be the only answer. So especially where we live, knowing where we are, we've had the new library come directly on our line. We've had the new townhomes come directly on our line. There've been several other projects that have occurred that have increased capacity on the line that now push that flow back towards my house. So what have you guys done since July to figure out the exact question that 50+ people asked in July, which is what has changed this summer on top of just a little bit more rain? Because again, I've lived here 6 years. I've seen some bad rains. I've heard my sump pump go off every 5 seconds because the backup is kicking back in because they can't keep up. Why am I now having sewage and stormwater of 6 inches in my basement? Why am I, to her point, I've paid thousands and thousands of dollars in 2 months to rip out stuff my husband had just put in to put things away. What have you guys done to figure out outside of rain, what is damaging my house every week?
We know for sure when the library was built, when the new townhomes were built, that line is connected to
So we.
Aberdeen, Rexford, that area. Do we have that knowledge? I mean, I'm sure you have that
Yeah.
knowledge.
Both of those projects tied directly into the interceptor. Yeah. Sorry, both of those. Both of those projects tied directly into the main interceptor, which, as Jeff had stated earlier, it's a 5-foot diameter pipe.
That flows on Wolf Road.
Well, yeah, I'm just talking the sanitary side. What was that? Yeah. And then additionally, so that was on a sanitary side. On a storm side, both of those projects actually flow directly into Cahoon Creek. They do not go into any other storm sewer that is, storm sewer conveyance that is underground. They have direct exits that go down into the creek there. So hopefully that kind of covers that. So yeah, it's all down. Hey, he said.
The maintenance here and all of that is good, and why are we still flooding that?
The flooding you mentioned, you didn't flood, the house didn't flood since 2009, and then you in your 6 years not flooded. But, obviously, I don't have a history on it, I don't have an answer for you right now, but we need to figure it out.
Just, those are the new projects, the Wolf Road project was happening in that July meeting, some man spoke to the fact that the people who did the Wolf Road project said they didn't agree with the city and how the project was maintained, that that project was going to flood houses, was going to cause issues. So there's obviously a lot of people that have heard things from professionals that are doing some of these projects that say they don't agree with what the city has done. But what else happened in July? If it's not those new buildings putting new water in the system, what else is going on in July outside of rain? I mean, that was the weekend of the festival. The festival I added, but outside of just blaming rain, what have you guys looked at? Because it seems like all we're hearing is rain numbers. We've all lived in Ohio for a long time. Sometimes it doesn't rain a lot. What something changed in July? Was there a line blocked? Did somebody forget to open something? Like, what have you guys done to figure those things out rather than just blaming the number of rain?
Did the pump or the lift station fail?
The original source.
Did you check all, that's for questions, did you guys actually, after July 2nd, what did you guys immediately do to check those type of things?
So, after, the first event, obviously, yeah, we're out in the field, we're checking the manholes, making sure everything's flowing. At that point, we did not see anything that wasn't flowing. Everything was moving in the direction it was supposed to be flowing. It moving, moving in capacity, but it was moving in the direction it was supposed to be. I know there was a question, someone mentioned something about lift stations. None of the lift stations failed during that. There was no failure. They all were running at capacity.
So multiple people have said today that the lines are running smoothly, your rat tail test and smoke test and all that stuff is working. The period of time that it takes you to get through the city, okay, people aren't okay with that, 6 years or whatever. So all I'm hearing is the infrastructure works, it's just not appropriate for the volume. So a typical storm drain, the main line should be 12 to 15 inches and ours are 8. So is it an infrastructure problem? Because that's every single piece to the puzzle is pointing.
Well, that's what I mentioned. We were looking at what I call the choke points. And the choke point has a small sewer. So, that's something that we may need to do. Depends on how much area is going into that sewer. If it's grossly undersized, consider.
Well, they're 8 inches, they're grossly undersized.
That's how much is going in.
Oh,
So it's not based on drainage, so it's a lot, it's an 8 inch, then it may need to be upset. We have to look at what the effects are downstream of that.
Anybody else have a question?
None of that.
Microphone, Renee has it.
My name is Dave Busa. I live 30611 Manhasset. I've been in the Bay about 6 years. I'm a local 125 player. Okay. So, like I told the mayor, I told Paul. Paul's done a great job. He's a good guy. I don't blame any of this on him. But I'm gonna tell you what I found. These sewers are definitely undersized. Like,
Can't hear you.
these sewers are definitely undersized because, like on my street on Manhasset, I've gone through the whole thing because my neighbors have had problems. And what I see is we got a 12-inch that goes all the way up to Webster. You got 9 or 10 houses on the 12-inch, and you got 3 catch basins. These catch basins are tied right into the 12-inch. When it rains real hard, these catch basins, you can see the water coming up. So not only is that a problem, but what I want to know is because I lived in Cleveland my whole life, and I never really had this problem, but from the clean out to the tie-in, I always thought that the city's responsible for that. Okay, because I think that's where the majority of these problems are. Is from the clean out to the tie-ins. All right? You're getting roots in those tie-in. Your flow is gonna be so restricted, it's gonna be unbelievable. I found in my house, majority of my problem was in the lawn, which was my problem. I took care of that. But also what I see is the tie-ins. And the city should have a crew that snakes these tie-ins for all the residents. That's the way it is in the majority of the western suburbs. I know a lot of guys in the service departments. And that's included in your taxes, from the clean out to the tie-ins, they're snaked by the city. You're responsible from the house to the clean outs, okay? That's what I don't understand, and that's what I like to get a clear answer on. And if there's an ordinance, okay, that ordinance needs to be changed. We shouldn't be responsible for roots that get onto city property. Like myself, I would have to dig up the island, which is city property, to fix where it's plugged and to put a clean out. Because without a clean out, you're not gonna be able to tell from your clean out to where it's tied in, if it's blocked or not, or try to snake it out and do it. But that's what I wanna know, you know, I wanna know why we're responsible from the clean out to the tie-in if it's on city property. We shouldn't be responsible for having to dig up city property. That's not our responsibility as residents.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Kakusa, Lake Road. I've owned 3 homes in Bay over the last 30 years. The first home I bought was, my first home was on Parkside in the early 90s. It flooded, basement flooded within the first year I was there. I hauled a finished basement out to the curb. And I learned at that time from consulting with the city, they said the source of the problem wasn't necessarily my downspouts, which were flowing correctly. They said a lot of the older homes on that street had downspouts going into the sanitary sewer, and the sanitary sewer back up into the basements. That was in 1993, which was 30 years ago. I then learned that there was an ordinance on the city books from the 1970s that says tying your downspouts into the sanitary sewer is prohibited, and that the city can force residents to remediate that if it's discovered they have 60 days to remediate that from when it's discovered. They can withhold a certificate of occupancy, which means you can't get insurance on your home, and the city could prevent you from selling your home if you're in violation of that ordinance. My question is, how many homes in Bay Village have downspouts tied into the sanitary sewer? And why in the last 50 years hasn't that been rectified?
Do you want to address that, Paul?
I think the short answer is we don't know what that number is. And part of this, when we talk about what has changed, is I think we talk about the INI and pipes getting older. And when we're talking about going through and doing this testing, it's identify where we need to tighten the system up, because obviously there's more rainfall, but there's also, the system ages, it's not going to be as tight. So we've got to make investments in that more than we have to, things that you're saying.
Just follow up. I learned in last week's committee meeting, which I also attended, in the mid-90s, the city dye tested virtually the entire city. So 27 years ago, the city had a list of every home in Bay Village that had downspouts tied into the sanitary sewers. You're telling me that now we have no idea? When we knew 30 years ago, that's probably the worst case scenario. So, I mean, how is it possible that the city is just not enforcing this ordinance? I mean, if there were dead trees falling from my neighbor's house onto my house at the frequency of basements flooding, the city would be all over that. If I was burning down my neighbor's garage because they had bad electrical system, I'd have to fix that. But if I flood the sanitary sewer with my downspouts, the city doesn't really care about it. They don't.
And that, so as far as that, I've been in the house files, and everybody can go back downstairs and look at their house file. And we've done dye testing before, and what their dye testing is, your downspout. So they're not checking that, you know, and if they failed in the past, what they would do is like, okay, snake out your downspout, we'll dye test it again, it functions, it's going through, or they give people the option of going on splash, which doesn't solve anything, but, you know, that at least isn't, you know, misconnected anymore. What they were testing for was the swear top. So, and I think that's the big component of it, and you ask us why we don't go after, this is me, my personal opinion being in the weeds, is you wouldn't like it if we went after everybody and forced them to do it, because that turns it back on you guys, and you want answers from us, and we're gonna do everything we can in the mainline sewers. And that's why we're kind of cautioning you, if we go after that kind of stuff, a lot of you people are gonna have to spend a lot of money, and you don't wanna do that, and we don't want to have to. I understand. But that's the result of what you're asking would be, yeah, and some of you have done all that stuff, but I can tell you that there's a lot of homes that haven't done. So, you know, I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah. So the dye testing, you know, was just to make sure that your downspouts led to the source. They were trying to separate out the sewers at the time, and all they were concerned about was that sanitary wasn't going to the lake. So they didn't kind of reverse that and figure out why it's not going, you know, and that's kind of what's causing the problem. That's why we have so much inflow.
I mean, if people have downspouts going into the sanitary sewer, that is a major source of infiltration.
Absolutely.
There's a 50-year-old ordinance on the books that if you want to live in Bay Village, it's your responsibility to remediate that. And it's the city's responsibility to enforce that. Because if 5 of my neighbors don't do it and I have to tear my basement out, I'm paying for them not fixing their problem.
So what happened in 1992, I'm not, you know, I don't know what happened in 1992, but you're right. So when we do this testing that the engineer was talking about, and we discover people who are misconnected like you described, it'll be current. If we went to somebody now based on something in 1992, that would not work in a situation where they were not cooperative and we had to go to court because these are criminal cases. So we have the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So if we do the smoke testing that they're talking about in these areas and we uncover people who are misconnected like you just described, regardless of what their situation was in 1992 or wherever that data is now, we're going to enter into that discussion with them and enforce that.
If I could respond to that, in regards, I live on Sandler Road, and to Paul's saying here, some of the sanitary sewers were connected to the storm sewers, and 3 of my neighbors had some pretty extensive fixing on their property. And he knows what I'm talking about. And what I want to find out is, and I'm not picking on my neighbor because they have a business next door. They have a toilet in a garage, and Paul sent them a letter because they did a dye test on the toilet in the garage, and they don't know where that toilet goes. They don't know where. It could be going to my yards, could be going to a neighbor's yard, but they sent them a note to get it fixed within 30 days. It's 90 days, and I haven't seen it.
That's a different issue. Do you have a
I understand, but it's still fixing.
A lot of residents here who want to discuss.
Believe me, I work garbage for the city of Rock River. I feel for these people.
I know.
I picked up carpet for 2
I know.
weeks.
Oh, yeah. Sir, do you have a question?
Yes, my name is Max Schooler. Is this working?
Not very well.
Not very well, not very good. Infrastructure. I live at 30614 Manhattan Drive. My neighbor already, who is licensed in the pipe fitters union. I'm a degreed engineer, both masters and bachelors. I've had 4 months now, hell, like a lot of you, soften up my basement, soften up my garage, soften up my driveway, because it runs down my driveway. The sewers, I got plenty of sewers in my driveway. I've done the work like you've done to improve your sewers. but the city sewers won't take it away. And I got a nice present from Paul here, if you wanna see the roof we pulled out. We did dig in the cul-de-sac against your wishes. Actually, with my friend. Okay, but we did find, but we still have more roots in the main sewer. And the city, they say they've cleaned it out, but I'm not seeing the results. I know we need a lot of, in the city, I guess you don't even have a snake, right? You don't even use a snake?
Well, that snake doesn't work in a large sewer, so we're out there in the big sewers, we don't have the ability to snake a 6-inch line, which is a lateral.
Okay, the problem is that they say they just jet them, but I pulled out, my neighbor and I, we pulled out a root that's 6 feet long, and we only pulled out part of it, and that's the sewer. And that's what's backing our water up into our driveways, into our sewers, and our homes, and into our basement. If it's not even backing up directly in the sewer, it's raising the water table, which penetrates our walls in our basement, and we get stoppage that way.
I'm sorry, do you have a question?
Yeah, what is the city doing really to clean out these sewers? Because I don't see any activity on my street.
No, right, okay. Anyone have a comment?
No, I mean. Like I said, we are going around, we do have, yes, we say we jet, we also have other implements that go on our flood trucks to handle roots and stuff like that. We also contract with other too, where we have some issues to help maybe with the system. So, we are out there doing the work, and it's
not working.
It's a process. And it's, I'm sorry, I don't want to speak to individual cases because this case is a little bit different. I worked with Max and I worked with Dave on 2 separate things. It's a stormwater issue, but that roof they pulled out was in his lateral, which is underneath the road, which goes to your argument. That's not my, I don't write ordinances, but so to say that it was this huge roof thing that was in the city's main is not really true. It was in his lateral, which connects to the main, and we did clean that sewer. You saw that sewer was clean. So I just, everybody's got individual issues. Sometimes it's on their own side, sometimes it's citywide. So you just can't, make a statement and be, like, we're not doing our job.
Oh, I agree with you 100%. But what I'm talking about is from that clean out to that time, I don't care what the lateral is. I don't care what size it is. That's where the problem is.
But that is, like you said, based on our ordinance.
If it's on city property, why should the taxpayer be responsible for that?
Right.
And that's where the majority of the problem is, I'm gonna tell you, is from that clean out to the sewer.
Right.
Because of the trees and everything, they just got right in there, and it's unbelievable. I mean, that's.
And Dave, this, following up, obviously we had a discussion, and I told you as we're looking at this in the plan, and you're going to serve, going back a number of years. We are looking at that ordinance and others, because if we're gonna go forward with a comprehensive plan, we're gonna hold ourselves accountable, and if we can find an issue on private property, make you aware of that, to make the system function better, we're gonna do that, and we need to be consistent about it, and that is one ordinance that I have our building department, our building director is here looking at it, and our law director has been looking at it since our discussion a few weeks ago. So that would require organic action, but it is something, if we're gonna be consistent and you're gonna take responsibility and you're gonna come up with a plan that you can implement and tighten the system up in a methodical sense, you're gonna need all those components.
Next question, sir.
Andy Dezenny from 26814 Bruce Road. I was listening to the engineer, Chagrin, talk about remediating some of this, and put some liners in, to tighten up the system. But then I was listening further, and he said the systems are designed for 5-year storms, for 10-year storms. We've just experienced multiple 25-year storms. So no matter what you're going to do to remediate the system, it won't accommodate a 25-year storm. Is that correct?
When a 25-year storm occurs, it will push through sort of surcharges that I talked about. So the level goes up in the sewer to push the flow through. At that point, it's just dependent on where the basement is relative to where the.
Understood.
So it's not, it won't handle a 25-year storm like a brand new sewer that was designed. You're correct.
But now we are here in 2023 and we're having 25-year storms. And by the way, you know, people said this hasn't happened before. We've lived in Bay for 23 years and I think this is the third time we've gotten hit. And we were good for about 10 years, but we got hit this time. But now we are here, we are gonna have 25-year storms. My grass has never been greener this summer, right? Normally it's straw this time of year. And we are gonna continue to see this. What are we gonna do to increase the capacity of the system to handle these big surges of rain? I mean, lining the stores, that'll help some of it, but we're still gonna have an 8-inch sewer or whatever size it is.
Right, when I was talking, and sorry, I didn't get the point across, but when I was talking about lining sewers, I also talked about looking at capacity bottlenecks. So we can determine where the bottlenecks are based on where everyone's flooding and then looking at the system and analyze 25-year storm, 10-year storm, whatever it is. But then it's a matter of, okay, what do we do? Do we put in another sewer? To help take the flow down to replace the existing source, and then we look downstream, do the same thing, so we have to get that water out and then for anybody else. But those are things that it's for us as the engineers to come up with. Here's where the issues are, the critical issues, and then here's what it's gonna cost. And then kick that over to council, and council has to figure out how to pay for it.
I agree. That's all time. That's a lot of time. You're talking, I mean, you already have a 3-year plan here, or whatever that works out to be. And along that 3-year plan, are you testing what you repaired and confirming what you repaired is the right solution?
Yes. Yeah, on the sanitary, yes.
I mean, you fix the sanitary, that kind of fixes most of the backups in the house, correct? Because that you get the infiltration from.
Not necessarily, because you're also getting the roots and the laterals, that's an issue causing backups. Then you got
The normal system handles that. When we have these big rains, we're getting infiltration.
I would tend to disagree. If the roots and the laterals, doesn't matter if the mains are clear. You have root in the lateral, it's like having a dam in there, the water's gonna back up to your foundation. So then you have.
All the people here have roots in their
Yeah, everyone.
Everybody else, I find that sound. This really happens when there's infiltration from the storm system, right? That's getting into our sanitary system. If we fix the sanitary, that would more or less keep less water out of our basements coming up through our drains. We're not talking about leaking through the walls from, water outside. We're talking coming up from our drains. That's the sanitary system.
Not necessarily, seeing clear water through drains also, so there's cross connections, high ends, but clears in the basement, so it shouldn't be there. So the lining doesn't take care of that. That's another issue that needs to take care of.
Taylor?
So I didn't hear an answer. So it seems like a capacity issue to me. We have 100-year-old drains that were sized 100 years ago.
It's not what it is. Looking at it, it's like looking at a cardiovascular system, you got arteries, you got veins, you got arteries. Something can go wrong in any of those areas, that's what we're saying.
The normal rain, it doesn't happen. When we have heavy rains and Saturday and stuff, you're getting that infiltrate.
That's why we're here. We wouldn't be here if it was a normal summer at normal rains. But
No, this happened throughout the last 23 years.
when you have a heavy rain. That's correct.
So, Taylor Evans, Manchester Lane, Mayor Kumar, thank you for, being responsive when I, emailed you after my second flooding, because I didn't see Winzig, Mayor or Kelly walk in the neighborhood or doing anything like that. It's a bummer and it's really a letdown. Show you care. Just show you care. So to that end, out of complete irony, I walked past you the next day entering what I assume to be the county building. A week ago. So I want to know, because I saw $21 million on that screen, and I'm not giving you guys another dollar.
I will not. I'll just default on the taxes and move out of this town, because you can't promise me right now that my infrastructure is gonna hold up for the next couple of years. And by the way, you guys have devalued my home now. Every single home in this place is now devalued because of this infrastructure. So tell me, because you were going into the county building, how Bay's own Chris Ronayne and the county government's gonna support that $21 million? Tell me how you guys have engaged Bride Sweeney at a state level, and tell me how Marcy Kaptur has been engaged at a federal level. How are we getting support, right, to get this right? Because right now, that screams to me tax raise. Give us more money, raise our taxes again. And that's unacceptable, right? And I want to hear that from all of you, right? Because you guys have been putting it on these guys to talk on that. And I know they're the engineers, but you guys have been silent. Lydia, you've been trying to move the conversation along. Stop. I'd like to hear anything, because clearly you haven't been coming to our doorsteps. So I'd love to hear what you guys have been talking about, at least in the meetings I hope you're having to address this. What's relief gonna look like? Because relief to me is increased insurance rates, a second deductible, actually a second claim that I'm not gonna file because I don't wanna get hit with a second deductible and get kicked off the insurance that I just joined 8 months ago. I wanna hold on to my insurance that will pay for the next flood that's coming because the infrastructure is failing. That's unacceptable. What do you want me to do?
I'm not asking you to do anything. I asked what.
I'm asking you to do something.
You said you would like to hear from each of us. What is it that you want to hear, and we will tell you.
What have the last 2 months happened amongst your groups? Because again, I haven't seen you, Pete, I haven't seen you, Tom, and I haven't seen you, Sarah, walk in our neighborhood. Our neighborhoods at least show you care. So tell us what you've done.
So I can't speak for anybody else up here. You understand that, right?
Speak for yourself.
Exactly. I can speak for myself. Early on, where I explained to him sort of the same thing you're saying, issue. Having said that, let me finish. I let you finish. Let me finish. Having said that, again, I can't speak for anybody here, but you don't know what streets I've been on. We have had phone calls.
So tell me, that's what I'm asking.
We've been on I was on Osborne Sunday. We were on Canterbury on July 11th. I've been on Aberdeen, Rexford. What is it that you want us to do? We already told council's job is to appropriate the funds to help you with your issue. That's what we do. That's what we do. We don't come up with the answers. We let the engineers do it and come back to council and say, here's what we need from you in terms of money. Will you give us this money? And if you think we're gonna say no, then I'm sorry, you're mistaken. Because we understand the depth and gravity of this issue. We can't do something that happened in 1990, 2000, 2015. We're here now. We're giving you this forum and you have our word. But this is something that we have been looking at and will continue to look at.
Taylor, can I just answer a couple of your questions? Your thing.
Now you're done, thank you.
You're absolutely right on the funding. I sit on a county committee, a District 1 Public Works Committee. One of the things we've done over the last 2 years is do a rule change that makes it more of a level playing field for the suburban cities that are well off, and they're all around the outer ring. Get funding on large scale projects from time to time. I've gotten to date $2.9 million in interest-free loan, which is a loan. We've got about $800,000 from the state in an interest-free loan, but over 20 or 30 years that adds up, and we're putting together a funding piece. I've been on the phone as late as yesterday with Congressman Miller. We have actual funding that is still alive at the federal level, the congressionally directed spending account that would go for sewers, and we move buckets around, whether it's for engineering or construction. Well, what that does is create our funding for it. And I've been in conversation at the state level with Director Mahalovic about funding from the state level, because you're absolutely right. If we're going to do this, we need help, we need support, and it can't come from all of our pocketbooks. Right. Number one. Number two, relative to your situation, it's where you live is a little unique because you're one of the few residents in the newer section that has a pretty large storm sewer. When we talk about the sizing, it's pretty big. So as we go in and you say, Jeff says we want to do dye testing, we want to do Manchester, it's interesting because if you've got a large storm sewer, what's not working? You know, is your tie-in too low in the storm sewer? Does it need to be a little higher? You know, I don't know, but in a general sense, you have a large storm sewer there that you're blessed with because your house, I think, are we built 80s.
74.
Yeah, 74, but you're still having an issue. And so part of having a consistent approach on this and going through methodically and looking at that is giving you advice because your situation is going to be a little different than your neighbors potentially. We want to give you relief. And sometimes it's a simple solution, sometimes it may not be, but at the very end of the day, you go back to what the city might have done in the 90s or something like that. I'm sort of a go forward guy, methodically go through, take a section, give you feedback, come up with a plan, execute, look for funding. And I'm always looking for funding. That's why I sit on this committee because you have to look where the buckets come from. Last year, you know, Wolf Road, over 80% of that project came from the county. Now, I could only use it on roads, but if I'm getting money for roads from the county, that saves our money elsewhere in the city for other projects like sewers. So it's a bit of a jigsaw puzzle, but I'm out there working on those committees at all three levels just because we've got to bring other revenue sources back.
Thank you for your time spending, fighting for that.
And Mr. Evans, it's Evans, correct?
Correct.
You have every right to be angry, as does everyone else in here. Bay Village is approximately 16,000 people. I can't claim to know all of them, but I have plenty of friends and neighbors who are, if they're not here, they're on Zoom. And I've talked to a number of people and I've tried to be of assistance. I'm sorry that I haven't made it to you, and that's actually part of what I was trying to convey to the mayor before, and instead you saw it from him. The best I can say is what is evident to everyone here, which is that right now is not good enough and that more needs to be done. The problem, of course, is that to ask any of you under present circumstances to be patient, as you appropriately just expressed, is incredibly hard. So on my end of things, it's like, in the same way that so many of you have different thoughts in terms of individual issues or things that you will believe will create the most benefit. And there's that ping pong and it's no, it's not this, it's this. And even the fine people from our service department, who some of remarks that I wish were stated somewhat differently. There's got to be greater clarity so that when we make these large investments, that they return the kind of result that we all hope for. Because otherwise, as Andy's pointed out, there are things undertaken and there's little bits and pieces here. And if they don't bring about the result, then what did we just do? We're particularly vulnerable because we don't have an industrial base. We don't have a commercial base. Anytime there's an ask for whatever, for schools, for anything, it's all of us. It's all of us too. It's all of us up here too. We got to get it right. I'm hoping we can get it done faster than that timeline that was presented earlier. That was from the engineers. I would like to suggest, to recommend to the administration. I know certainly I would vote for it because I'm one of the guys. I'm one of the guys who voted for the tax increase on the sewers because although I did not wish any of this upon you and did not wish this would happen, I think it is foreseeable based on our past and based on where we're going. I'd like to see additional investments made both to the system itself, but even as was in terms of the ongoing maintenance to increase the frequency. I believe there's some remarks that were made along those lines that are entirely on point. And I recognize that there's discussions about bottlenecks. One of the bottlenecks is going to be manpower. We should have more staffing there. John, you said you had like 4 guys and then 2 more, something like that. yeah, there's gotta be more people. We need more people. Get me a request, get me and my fellow council members a request. I'll gladly, stamp that through. We need more people out there for the same reason that I have, that you were discussing even in terms of seeing us. It doesn't mean it'll be perfect, but you at least will have that additional confidence of knowing that there's the effort being made. Cause I didn't have this go round, but I have had issues in the past, and I know what that is, to live with that, to know the weather reports are coming, to not sleep well, to constantly be wondering what if, and then, you go on vacation or whatever, and then you either come back to something or you're worried about something. We gotta do better. We gotta do better.
When there's standing water in your HVAC system and your wife is going through an intense skin condition for 11 months, this is a lot more than wet floorboards and soaked carpet. This is my wife's health. This is my children. This is the air that they are breathing yesterday, today, and for months to come, with a fear that every rainstorm will sicken them again. This has nothing to do with rusty pipes. This has nothing to do with anything other than the health of my family, and that is not my family alone. You're dealing with it, you're dealing with it, you're dealing with it. When this stuff backs up into our home, it's affecting our health. Mental, physical, emotional. You can see my intense nature right now. It is unacceptable, and it is far greater than, like I said, wet floorboards and wet carpet. But thank you, and that was an excellent answer, and I appreciate it greatly.
Pam?
Hi, Rosemary Coleman. I just moved here recently, a couple months. Sunday, I didn't sleep.
Osborne's a big street, I was there.
But that's okay. I had an issue. I don't know exactly if it's related to everybody's issue or if it's my own personal issue that's gonna open up a whole nother can of worms. I do not have overflowing on drains, but I had significant seeping from the ground. In some areas, over an inch. It was about 5 different areas. What would cause that and what would remedy it? And is it related to the drainage problems? So my drainage did not overflow, it just large puddles of an inch seeped up from the ground.
Do you know what the cause of that?
No, I'd have to go look and talk. I'd have to come to your house and talk to you.
I'm sorry?
I said, I would have to come over, or one of us would have to come over and talk to you, get the background of it before we could tell you,
Okay.
okay, which we could do.
27001.
Tom, you mentioned that we need more people. Why don't we privatize that type of inspection? I mean, years ago, we had our people pick up garbage. It took a week to do it. Now it gets done in a day. Why do we have to hire more people for the city? Why can't we get that done and have a crew, many crews come in and do that in a year's time instead of 3 years' time, 6 years' time?
Are you talking about testing?
Testing, all of it.
Yeah,
Maintenance,
that's what I'm
testing,
talking
whatever.
about. Testing. I mean, they're two separate things, so.
There's companies out there that are more than willing to be hired to come in and they can bring multiple crews.
Yeah, you're correct, there are companies out there that do that. And that may be, something that we do automatically with the service departments. Also talking about the staffing of the service department before, that staff more, you don't have to hire out. The testing part of it, like the smoke and dye testing, it needs to be done, as I understand, service department crews. We don't do that, we hire that out, so we don't take that out of the way from their job. So we're doing that somewhat, and it's a consideration for future maintenance. We do hire a couple of companies to come in and do the large mains every year. So we do farm some of that work out to contractors.
Yeah.
I'm Margaret Raymond, and I live on, 270-95 Lincoln. And I just have a question about the choke points that you talked about, that you wanted us to check over here. Now, how are those determined by that map? Do you have in different colors of blocks?
Well, it starts out with mapping, you know, look at the network of sewers. And also, the areas where we're getting most flooding. We obviously want to look at those first. Look at the infrastructure that's in place. If there's something crazy like a 12-inch sewer going down an 8-inch sewer, that's a choke point. So it's kind of go through with that.
Do you have that information about, 8-inch, 12-inch, is that something you can look at?
Yes,
On a map?
yes, in the last 4 years, the city has developed, it's called GIS now,
Oh, okay.
which has all the infrastructure and other things now.
Robert Lundquist, I live at 23909 Wolf Road on the east end. This question is for John from the service department. I met him a couple of weeks ago, and he was supposed to follow up with the county because they screwed up my ditches and my ditch, and all that rainwater wound up in our face. So when are they gonna fix it?
I have correspondences as we speak, because there's still items that are left on that punch list that we spoke about.
Yeah.
That have not been addressed
You
yet.
saw difference of height and everything else. And, you know, the county's got the money, so why aren't they fixing it?
I don't have an answer for you at this.
We have to get Commissioner Wayne down here.
That I don't know, but like I said, I have reached out to them to see where we're at with getting all those punch list items addressed and finding maps and everything.
Or Mayor Kumar, you're on the sewer.
I was just gonna say, if you end up having issues, I can resolution for the very near future, let me know, and, we can, go ahead and do the
Excuse me, Paul Carr, I live in the corner of Lincoln and Walshire. I moved to Bay last August, and my basements had sewage come up July and then again in August. But done 2 insurance claims before I start paying more money than I already have on mitigation. What's the best way to get someone, one of the engineers, out to my house to like talk to me in person, to walk through like what's going on and then what some proper mitigation would be? I left the voicemail, I certainly appreciate the calling you've had, but the calling, the emailing, is there a portal online I can submit something through?
Yeah, if you have a specific question or and something we can help, I know a lot of people call it the service department, contact John, we arrange a time, and we come out here about calling.
Emailing, probably email would be the best.
Email address?
It's JLISKOBEC at cityofbayvillage.com.
You can't,
It's on the list, yes.
if you can't find it, just email me and I'll push it that way. How's that?
Okay, sure.
My question is related to engineering. There's a lot of talk about the size of the mains in the system. And what is being,
You need a microphone, nobody can hear you.
Renee's got it.
Patrick, the end for Bradley Road. My question is. My question is an engineering question, and that question is, that, as others have brought up, and you mentioned, the system is designed for less rainfall. What is being considered from a standpoint of lessening the inflow of water into the storm sewers from, solutions that would be like the, high retention basin at the neighborhood level, or pilot soils? I know that those are kind of a master plan. So what, is that part of the options for solutions to actually lessen the inflow rather than increase the size?
So, I'm not an engineer, I don't play one on TV, but That again, it goes to Dave's question earlier about the ordinances, looking at that. I know our building and law director said we're looking at our current ordinances and we work with our engineers of, you know, are there opportunities to, there's some pump that's going to splash in your yard or a downspout, and some people have done rain gardens and some people have done other types of devices. Eric, our building directors in the back, we can speak to it more clearly in terms of the proper names, but we are looking at that. We want to make sure there's a process in place for going to do that, so that you don't flood your neighbor. So for example, in my house, I have an addition in the back, and the beds and my neighbors are far away, and the water would be caught in the beds. I could probably disconnect those if those were not, if those needed to be done. Side yard, not so much, I'd probably flood my neighbor. So we want to be very careful we go forward and provide guidance of when it may make sense to take water out of the system. And third point, the amount of rainfall is increasing, and so in addition to tightening up the system, and the way we can be creative, we keep some of that rain on your property and let it evaporate with time. We want to try and provide all the tools we get for the residents. But I'll just let Jeff talk about it a little bit too, give him other comments.
And thank you for that answer, but the question is related more to the public side of the system. So the curb cuts, I've seen other cities where they've done curb cuts and then they have bile swales to the side of the road. And it's pulling that water before it ever gets to the sewer, so it's not creating that back pressure that comes into the residence basements. So rather than increasing the size of the pipe and trying to flush it away from the neighborhood, dealing with it on site, and then that slowly infiltrates into the storm sewers after the rain event has ceased.
That is a practice that does work if you have the proper type of soil. If you have a heavy clay for 8 to 10 feet deep, those things fill up immediately, just overflow. So they have their areas where they can be used, but it has to be based on soil type. Those public areas.
So it's not big enough, you can't make them big enough to be effective. Right?
No, they fill up, and you know, the 2-inch rainfall in an hour fill up immediately.
Yeah, would you have any questions on that?
Hi, I'm Richard Pressler. I studied engineering. I graduated from medical school, so I'm definitely overeducated. But you know, I've lived in the same house since 1952. My dad was an engineer, and he installed many. There's redundancy in my house in many systems, and you know, I would recommend to my neighbors and people who have recurrent flooding. You know, and this advice is not guaranteed by the management, but getting multiple sump pumps. If you don't have a sump well, you may well need them. My dad has storm lines underneath the basement floor. We have footer lines. We have, you know, downspout lines. We have 2 sump pumps. One works off electricity. The other one is a Venturi pump. We have 2 sump lines going out of the house, or at least they're probably joined outside the house. And then I live at the corner, I live at 28412 Lincoln Road, and actually at the intersection between Lincoln and Forest. When I was a boy in the early 50s, Lincoln in that area was only a block and a half long. Now it's, I don't know, 3 miles long. And Forest was we just had ditches. All along the railroad tracks from at least Dover Center to the end of Bay Village was a swamp. And Knickerbocker Road was a swamp. And I'm just wondering, there were swamps on the other side of the railroad tracks in Westland. I don't know what's happened to all this groundwater, but I think there are definitely choke points. It would be interesting to do some flow measurements in the neighborhood, because the closer you get to the intersection, the greater the tendency is for people's basements to flood. And this has occurred in my experience. I can remember floods in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s, and now. So I think there's a tendency to attribute it to a big rain, but things must be happening. I mean, we must be close to maybe a previously unknown creek. You know, there are things going on, but what happens is I think there's backup in the intersection, maybe surcharging, and I think it's going into people's basements. Virtually everybody has had foundation work and new lines put in, lines tested, and all kinds of stuff in my neighborhood. I'm very close to the intersection, but I've so far kind of lucked out. I guess my thinking is, you know, I've lived in this house this long, I'm not gonna put anything of any value in my basement. And I hate to tell all these young folks that, but I think that's the reality is, in my experience, that, you know, the neighborhood floods every decade. It's hard for me to attribute it to just, and certainly we've had tremendous raises. There's no doubt about it, but there must be something else going on. And do we get Westlake's runoff? No. We
Goes
don't.
to the creek. Goes to the creek.
Goes to the creek.
Runoff.
Yeah.
How do you know?
And my name is Mark Corson. I've lived all over the world. I've moved house 30 times. I've had wet basements and dry. I've had 4 houses that my family's owned in Bay Village. I look at topographical maps before I buy houses. My house is totally bone dry in the basement. My basement drains go into Cahoon Creek. I looked, before I bought my current house, I looked at the topographical maps, and the flow maps that are available to anybody who does the research. And I found out all the water in Westlake, including I-90, goes into the creeks. And I think blaming Westlake for our problems is not really, I think, a solution. It all goes into Porter, Cahoon, and my creek behind my house. Cahoon Creek varies from like 6 inches deep to like 3 feet deep in a matter of hours. But also I own property on both sides. And I also own land that has a servitude that Heinen's has. And the comment that was made earlier about their parking lot, I know all their drains very well. I own the servitude. It's, well, Heinen's has it. It's on my property. And they have about a 24-inch drain that goes into Cahoon Creek for all their parking lots and all their hard services. So Heinen's, and I believe most people who are on Cahoon Creek, Porter Creek, which I also used to own a house on, they drain into the creeks, not into the city storm system.
Thanks. I think you may have answered my question, but do you know what happened to all the swampland?
I was in the swampland 2 days ago. The swamps are still there to some degree along the railroad tracks, particularly on the Westlake side.
All right, so we're going to actually wrap this up here because it seems they're just going to keep kind of going in circles there. Much more on this and the other stories of the day tonight on 19 News. That's 10 and 11.
19 News, now streaming on Samsung Smart TV. Search for channel 1035.
So I have a question on the financial side, and I think the lack of answer on someone else's question has put it back on, it's going to be on us. When you smoke test, you find our lines are crossed, and now it has to be fixed. I completely agree, it has to be fixed. I don't want my house to flood, I don't want my neighbor's house to flood, etc. What can you guys do to help us on our side? I think she had mentioned it, we're tapped out. I put one insurance thing through in 6 years, and my insurance said you put another one through and we're dropping. My insurance agent called 5 other insurance companies and they said we won't pay for it, meaning I can't have house insurance because of one flood. I'm also at $12,000 in 1 month from my finished basement having to get ripped out from sewer water remediation because there was literal sewer in my ground that needed to be cleaned out so I could actually walk on my floor and put the new backflow valve so that never happens again in my front yard. That's only the start. I now have to dig up other things or re-waterproof and already waterproof, just like the other person. I had a faucet coming out from underneath my steps, not from my, I also had sewer water, but I had actual holes in my floor leaking that I didn't even know existed because of this water. What can you guys do to help us financially? Can you work with local plumbers on privatization to help get us a discounted rate? And there are plumbers in Bay that while I didn't, again, haven't met any of you, haven't seen any of you in my 6 years, they were at my house fishing out water. They've been there on my midnight calls. They know me better and they've given me the discounts because they've watched me sob. What can you guys do to help us as a county find plumbers that are willing to work with us at a discount, willing to help the personal side
certain programs where we try and get joint bids, things of that nature? Is there a way to collaboratively work with entities if a number of homes are identified for a certain type of issue? That's something we truly look into.
Yeah, our role on the finance committee is to help manage the city's funds. And what normally happens is a recommendation would come from the directors for a certain project or for an initiative that's reviewed by the finance committee and also be reviewed by our sewer and drainage committee. And then we would make a recommendation to council to act on that request.
But that's for your funds for public land. I'm talking, how are you guys gonna help figure this out for us? Who can you guys call? I can give you some great plumbers that are, they live in Bay 2 that have been at my house in the last 6 years, fixing sinks and everything, that when this happened, they dropped everything to come help us because we had that relationship. I don't wanna know what you guys will do for your funds for the public side. I wanna know what you guys will commit to help us on the private side. We don't have the funds to keep doing this, but we want to fix the problem too. Everyone in here wants to fix it. What can you commit to today to look into, to help with, to give us a channel that when you get to this point, call this number and don't book it yourself, talk to us first. Like, what can you guys do?
That's a great question. It's difficult for us to answer that yes or no. I think there's no way tonight that we're going to satisfy any of the answers to the questions and concerns we have, because everybody's here for the most part because they had an issue. One of the things that we're challenged by at council is none of us are engineers, but we rely on our engineers and our staff to kind of tell us what are the root causes of the problem. And what I'm hearing tonight is that there are a number of issues that exist. Okay, I&I is part of it. Lines could be crossed. The mains could be small. We may have to fix culverts and things like that. But once we hope to identify those things that are problematic, we pledge to try to finance what we can for the city, perhaps for residents, but there's no guarantees tonight. This is a call to action today, because this is the largest audience we've had in the last 15 years. We can delay snow removal. We can delay trash collection, but nothing is worse than a wet basement, because we've all gone through it. So please give us a little bit of time. We laid a timeline out now. We're on the clock. We understand that.
Thank you.
And I feel for everybody here in the room, because all of us had some level of water in our basement, but we do need to do something. It's not going to happen overnight, though.
I think also, I'd like to address that as well. I think one of the things that we're making a commitment to everyone here today is that we recognize that there are issues on the city side. We are committed to fixing those issues so that it's not just, oh, your footer tiles are clogged, or some of the things that have happened in the past. My sister used to live on Bruce Road. For years it was, oh, the food in your basement is because of problems on your side. We know it's not just problems on the private side. We know that there are issues on the public side with the public infrastructure. And before we're asking you to make all sorts of investments, we want to make sure that our public house is in order. We're taking care of our infrastructure. And we're looking at where are the fixes that we can put in place. And I think there's a commitment from council and from the administration to really look at the options and come up with what is the menu of options, what's going to work in the various areas. Having this information from people, like, is it stormwater, is it sanitary, is it mixed, is so helpful, because we can see the patterns then, and we can see where the issues are, and the engineers are working on that. So I do think that there is a commitment from the administration, from the council, that we know that this is going to be a long-term investment, long-term fix, and we're not just going to push everything onto the private side.
The other thing that we've started is I kicked off an initiative for communications, contacted the mayor and also contacted my committee members. And I've been online trying to capture good content information that we can share with the residents. We saw some of it tonight in the PowerPoint. But what is a primary sump pump? What is a secondary sump pump? What is the stack system? How do the systems work? What can you do as a homeowner? So I came across a document that was put together in the Westlake, city of Westlake, and come to find out we actually have a copy of that here at some age that we're taking a look at. But I went online and looked at systems and content all across the country, and I've been collecting the information and working with the mayor and the committee to put together a booklet
that we can put on the website that we can provide to the homeowners, so you can understand some of this stuff. As Mr. Clark said, we're not engineers. People have called me and said, why does this happen? I'm not an engineer, but I know how to communicate. I do it for a living. So what I did was I took that expertise and I went out and got some information to then share with the residents. I've also tried really hard to follow up with everyone that's contacted me. I've received phone calls and I've received emails. And like Lydia, I drove the streets the other night during the storm. Nobody cares, nobody thinks about that. But I got a call and said my street's flooded, so I jumped in the car and I drove around for a couple hours. When I got over the street, it had subsided, and I made note of it, and I followed up with the residents. So if there's anyone here that I did not follow up with properly, I apologize to them. My job was to get the information as quickly as I could to the service director and to the mayor so we could start mapping the information. And that's what I tried to do. And I've also followed up with individual homeowners who called me 2 or 3 times, recommended people that I know, friends of mine that are in the business. I spent an hour and a half at Mojo's Coffee with a woman who lives in Avon Lake. Gave her my card, gave her a whole bunch of information and said, here's people that you can contact. These are friends of mine. Trust them. I hope they can help your situation. So it doesn't always happen overnight, as we've said a number of times, but we're trying to do what we can. But what's most important is that when the city and their directors and the engineers bring us a recommendation, please know we're not going to sit on it. That's not our intent. We're going to burrow into the budget. We're going to try and find the money. We're going to try and allocate the money, move as quickly as we can. And if it's getting more people for John's department, I think we would fund that. If it's finding an outside company to do stuff and die cuts, I think we would fund that. We need to hear from them. The research is helpful. These maps are helpful. I look, everybody's got a copy of that. Mapping within the city where we can focus to try and make things better. So that's what we've done so far. I compliment Lydia for putting this committee together. On the night of the incident, I was out of state and my house flooded. My son pumped up. My children were there. And they had to deal with it. Our power went out. So yeah, it hits all of us. It's not just each one of you. We all have to deal with it. Deal with the water, deal with the fix, deal with the plumbers, deal with the repair. So after that, I called those and said, we got to get our committee together. We got to get going on this. I'm sorry, it took a couple of weeks. We had vacations, we were personal matters. We did our best to get everybody together and also gave the engineers some time to evaluate their task force and what they're doing. But tonight's a start. I promise you we'll move forward and make the decisions on behalf of the residents.
Laura Reynolds, 26826 Bruce Road. One question is, what is the annual budget? How much is earmarked for sewer maintenance this year? Renee?
Yeah, so the budget for the sewer fund itself is just under $3 million. And then we provide another anywhere from $2 to $3 million in capital projects for the sewer fund. So over the since 2012, the city has spent over $50 million.
Well, but how much was spent like last year?
Maintenance, about $3 million.
3 million, okay. So with more money, things can get done. What's our next step after we leave here tonight?
Well, one of the things that's been talked about is a survey that's gone out to residents that have been impacted. I would encourage you to complete the survey and get it back to the engineers so they can start collecting data. I know there's a number of initiatives through John's department that you're already undertaking. Paul, maybe you want to address that. Just the work that not only ongoing, but the hotspots are being checked.
Was that electronic or mail?
I believe it was mailed. It's available on the city website. And there's some hard copies in